Scary Good. Welcome to Daily Dogman on the Scary Good NYC channel. Yesterday, our episode had a bit of an audio glitch, so I was going to re-render it and replace it, but then I remembered this other Pennsylvania story, and I thought maybe I could turn them into a double feature for Sunday today. The first story was alleged to have taken place in Pine Ridge, Pennsylvania, to a couple out camping. First, I want to establish that I'm not talking about the Chestnut Ridge, which is located over closer to West Virginia and the Mothman down south and west. I mean Pine Ridge, Pennsylvania, which is located near Gettysburg, Route 209, and closer to New Jersey than any other state. As you can see from this map, there's about 5-6 hours of driving between the two places. I looked in Google and saw there's a campground called the Pine Ridge Campground, and I assumed that might be where the first story took place. However, the storyteller mentioned something about a mountain, and it doesn't look as though that campground is located on a mountain. I might be wrong. If you're either from that area or better at reading maps than I am, please let us know if you think you know where they might mean. Turning on the satellite imagery, we can see these ridges here. I guess those are hills and valleys, right? So maybe the couple actually might have been camping out over here somewhere. If so, that's doubly interesting because today's all-new story takes place around this little place here called Burnt Cabins, Pennsylvania. Again, a campground figures into the story. Dear Scary Good. This happened many years ago when I was 18 or 19 years old, back around 1999 or 2000. For a few years in a row, my parents went to stay at a campground in Burnt Cabins, Pennsylvania each summer and would drag me with them. One of those years, I made friends with a guy my age who lived in the next town over. Sometimes my parents would let me stay over at his parents' house and we'd walk back along highways and through people's backyards to the campgrounds the next day. One time, he had stuff to do, so he was walking me back extra early, and the sun's light was only just beginning to be seen in the sky. It was still pretty dark for the most part, and it was chilly too, so there was an aura of creepiness over everything that I had never felt before, even though I'd been this way a few times. We were walking past this white church when I heard a sound down the dirt road across the street, and right there was the silhouette of the hugest man you can imagine, and he seemed to be walking in our general direction. I was about to wave and call out to him when my local friend pulled me down behind a rock that was there in front of the church. It wasn't a very big rock, so we were pretty much crawling on our bellies to stay hidden behind it. I whispered, asking if he knew who that was. My friend looked at me like I was crazy. "It's not a question of who that is, brother," he informed me bluntly. "It's a question of what that is." Not understanding what he meant, I peeked around the rock carefully and squinted into the darkness. The figure was coming closer, but he was taking his time about it. He seemed to be out for a Sunday morning stroll. I strained my eyes and waited patiently for him to be lit well enough for me to understand better what I was seeing. And then, that's exactly what happened. The figure emerged from the pitch darkness under the trees, and I could see that it was not a man, not at all. This was some kind of an impossible, dog-eared troll kind of thing. It was too tall to be real, looking like something out of an animated Hulk movie. It seemed so muscular that it was sort of top-heavy. Its chest and shoulders seemed so broad that it should tip over. The head didn't look so much like a dog head as it looked like the head of a Halloween mask of a rabid dog. Everything about this creature was over the top. It really looked like it had just walked off stage at a guar show. That's how impossible looking it was. But it was walking down a dirt road in Burnt Cabins, Pennsylvania at dawn. So I'm guessing he probably wasn't coming from a rock show or a comic book convention. I made myself so small behind that rock. I tried to basically crush myself down to a diamond. I willed myself to be invisible. I prayed not to be seen. I'm not sure if I even risked breathing. Somehow, my buddy and myself remained hidden behind that little rock, and we watched the monster walk bipedally across the road 2 or 3 steps down the other side of the church. Then we saw it walk past the church down to the forested area beyond. That was the last we saw of it. It either didn't notice us or didn't care about us, but either way, we both felt very fortunate. After it was gone, we lingered for a while looking for footprints and talking excitedly about what we had just lived through. We were not frightened at all after it left, although we had both been creeped out the entire morning leading up to the sighting. It was as though the creature brought the gloom along with it and carried it away when it departed as well. We had no feeling that there might be another monster there. We felt safe because we'd seen the monster leave. Now I'm going to describe what we saw, which I've taken a lot of guff over. We didn't see what people apparently want us to have seen. It wasn't a Bigfoot, and it was not a standard Dogman like I hear other people talking about. This thing sort of looked like a big, giant, savage version of a labradoodle, standing on its hind legs and walking just as though that were a normal thing for a giant labradoodle to do. Now, you can laugh all you want because I know labradoodles have a funny sounding name, but their eyes are hidden by their hair, giving them an air of mystery, and you'll have to take my word for it that when they are giant and towering over you about 30 feet away in the night, they are no longer in any way even slightly cute. So basically, if you take the cutesy word labradoodle out of the description, what you're left with is a 7-foot tall or taller, dog-like, bear-like, sort of shaped like a mastiff but with much more solid legs kind of thing. Its legs were sort of more like a horse's legs than a dog's legs. Dog's legs don't usually need to be that thick because the weight is evenly distributed over all 4 limbs, but this animal, or whatever it was, seemed to be designed from the start to walk upright. Its fur was somewhat long and evenly dark all over with no white or other colors in it that I could see. I could never make out the eyes past the fur, which gave it the terrifying appearance of a blind creature walking through the dark. Maybe it really had no eyes. Maybe it used sonar like a bat, or maybe it could sense its surroundings in other ways. If so, it would surely sense me and my friend hiding behind that tiny rock. The thing did have a tail, and once again, it was a tail that you would expect a labradoodle to have. It was big and long and hairy, and it flicked it now and again in a manner kind of like a cow does to keep the flies away. I wasn't close enough to see if there were actual flies there, but why wouldn't there be? Unless the entire thing was a hallucination, that was a predator. Predators create a lot of scenarios that attract flies. I would imagine if I were a fly, I could make a pretty good living just by hanging around a large predator. So, I have little doubt this monster's tail had swatted some flies in its time. I'm not really friends with my friend from that summer anymore, but we did reconnect on Facebook and we did briefly discuss this story in a chat. His interpretation of it now is that we both experienced a, quote, mass hallucination, unquote. I explained to him that he doesn't understand what a mass hallucination is, and that we couldn't possibly both have imagined exactly the same thing, but he countered that by telling me that we couldn't possibly have seen a giant labradoodle walking upright past a church one day just before dawn. Things like that just don't happen. Mass hallucinations, on the other hand, do happen, so therefore we must have had a mass hallucination, period. And that was the end of him talking to me about anything other than birthday greetings. One of his reasons for saying the occurrence couldn't have been real is that the dirt road we saw it walking down only leads to the parkway. Well, that's true, but past that parkway is miles and miles of forest. And where was the thing walking to? It walked into the woods behind the church, which in turn lead to miles and miles and miles of undisturbed forest land, including prime hunting grounds. The more I look into the story, and the more I think about it, the more I suppose that what I saw that night might actually have been some kind of real predator that might actually live in the area. There certainly would be enough game to support such a supposed creature. The thing is, that's the same logic used to justify thinking Bigfoot might be real, or other kinds of Dogman or other kinds of large carnivorous cryptids. The logic applies if there were actually one such species existing in our woods. But why then do almost every Bigfoot or Dogman or large cryptid report seem to be about different kinds of monsters? Why do they differ in appearance so much? How many hidden predators could possibly all be out there in the same forests, competing for the same game? No, I fully understand why my friend chooses to say that we imagined what we saw. Even though he's being illogical, he's choosing a far less frightening brand of illogic than the one I'm leaning toward, that what we saw wasn't really something we were supposed to see. I suspect that somehow that thing we saw was both there and not there. I suspect that maybe we were looking at another time or another variation on this time, but in either case, it wasn't our place or time that we were seeing. Or there's another possibility, even more disturbing in some ways. What if there are things or people out there, as talked about in Native American and other traditions, who can actually shapeshift or at least appear to us to be anything they want to appear to us to be? Interacting with such creatures would be exceedingly difficult, since we would need to accept that anything we saw, heard, touched, smelled, or tasted could be an illusion created to trick us. The more stories I read about the paranormal or supernatural or unexplained, the more I wonder if such creatures are actually among us, even as I write this. If so, they may constitute the greatest horror of all, and they may be the Dogman itself. So now, I'm going to play the other Pine Ridge story from yesterday, but in sync this time. As you watch, see if you can decipher what location they might be describing. Please enjoy, and we'll be back tomorrow with the next chapter of the Bryan Werewolf saga. See you then. Scary good. Welcome to Strange Saturday on Daily Dogman on Scary Good NYC. Today we've got an especially strange Dogman story from Pennsylvania. They're always strange if they're from Pennsylvania, so let's just jump right into it. Dear Scary Stories, my neighbors make fun of me and say I claim I saw a werewolf carrying a cell phone. But they're exaggerating to make fun of me. The thing this one was carrying was too large to be a cell phone. It was much closer in size to one of those Amazon tablets. You know, the cheap ones. But that isn't what it was. It seemed to be some other kind of technology that only resembled a tablet. It was rectangular, dark on the underside facing me, and glowing on the upper side facing the creature. I remember different colored lights glowing from the device and reflecting off the face of the creature, which resembled a dog with a cartoonishly long snout, like the big bad wolf from those old cartoons. It was walking along, not watching where it was going, staring at the device in front of its face the same way people walk down the block, bumping into each other while staring blankly into their phones. Context is important, and I haven't explained the context to you at all. I was out camping with my wife of 22 years, and we were camping out at a particular mountain that I don't want to name in Pennsylvania, which we had camped at 2 times previously. Let's just say this is near the infamous Chestnut Ridge, which I didn't know was infamous at the time of this story. This was a place where we felt comfortable and at home, at least back then. I don't know what to think about the place now. In the early evening of our first of 3 planned days camping, I went searching for dry wood we could use for the fire. When I got back to camp, I discovered my wife sitting there, looking stunned. I asked her if she was all right, and it took her some time to compose herself enough to answer. When she did, she told me that she had seen lights. I didn't know what she meant, so she explained that these were the most beautiful lights she had ever seen, and that they danced in the night sky for her. I asked her where they went to. She pointed in the direction she had been staring in. They went over there, then shot down into the forest underneath them. That's what she told me. I had no idea what to make of any of this. She didn't seem to be joking. Was she having some kind of an episode? Did she maybe leave her meds at home? Should I get her to a doctor? If so, what kind? An optometrist? A psychiatrist? I asked her if she wanted to go home, and that woke her from her reverie. She insisted she wanted to stay, that the incident was over now. It had just surprised her. I mean, who expects to see UFOs dancing in the sky while camping? So, we laughed it off and went on with our night. We usually tell scary stories after we eat while out camping, but my wife was already scared, and she didn't need any stories. So, we just hung out and talked like people used to do back in the 20th century. Surprisingly, even though we had no entertainment other than each other, we stayed up a bit later than usual and didn't realize how late it was getting. When I saw my watch, I let out a gasp at the time as it was nearly midnight. My wife gasped at the exact same moment. Had she also checked the time? I glanced in her direction and saw that she was not staring at her watch. She was staring out in the same direction as before. Her jaw was slack, and her eyes wide. I followed her gaze, and there, faintly illuminated by our campfire and the multicolored lights glowing on its face from the device it was holding, there walked the werewolf-type creature I've already described to you. This thing didn't seem at all aware of either of us, even though he was walking directly toward us. This was a tall dog, standing and walking on its hind legs. It had very short, dark fur and a long, long snout. It wasn't really like any kind of wolf, dog, or coyote I had ever seen before. It walked sort of like a man, but not exactly. It reminded me of how they would make the cloven-hooved characters walk in those old Jason or Sinbad movies from the 1950s or 60s, except this had paws, not hooves. but its legs bent backward like a cloven-hooved beast. So it kept walking directly toward our camp, and my wife and I stood up and got out of its way. It walked within 2 feet of our campfire, never ceasing to stare at its stupid device the entire time, never acknowledging us, walking past our tent and then walking off into the woods beyond. Midnight schmidnight, we packed up and went home immediately. We do plan on going camping again, possibly, but never again would we ever camp anywhere near the Chestnut Ridge. The Dogman there don't even watch where they're going. See you tomorrow for another Daily Dogman. Same dog time, same dog channel.
I hear there's a celebrity with the initials GG appearing at the next Northeast Comic-Con.
Is it Gina Gershon?
What? No.
Is it Greg Grumberg?
Greg which?
Greta Garbo?
Come back for more scary stories.